Ho ho ho, and welcome to Archetype Builds. This is the channel where we take an archetype, a paragon, a certain stereotype from fantasy or fiction, and we show you how to build it in your Dungeons & Dragons character. Merry Christmas to all who celebrate, those who watch the channel, and we have a very holiday-themed character build for you today. Today we are going to be looking at the Mistress of Cold, the Avatar of Ice, the Ice Queen.
I don't think I'll ever let you in. Easier to break it off best friends. I don't really understand myself. I don't really understand, need help. I don't wanna be left on the shelf. Couldn't even hear me if I yelled. It's so cold outside. I'm alone, I'm alright. It's so cold outside. I'm alone, I'm alright. It's so cold.
Now this build is going to be a relatively simple build for players who are interested in creating kind of an ice-themed D&D character. It is going to be a full spellcaster, and we are going to, kind of mostly be talking about the spell selections. So we'll kind of crank out some early character choices, but some of it should be relatively obvious past level 3, I would say. So strap in through then, but I'm imagining that for your holiday one-shots, if you're looking for an ice person, you should get the gist of kind of the direction that I'm going in pretty quick. So for our race, I think a lot of the kind of examples, obviously, in media are humanoid, human-ish. Thinking about like Killer Frost or Elsa from Frozen, or blah blah blah. I'm sure I'm going to have clips all over the place, but these characters are oftentimes humans who have some kind of accident or discover some sort of power within themselves. So you can definitely go human. And if you want to go variant human and get that first level feat, there is a feat selection I'm going to recommend at level 4. But I'm going to actually recommend, for D&D purposes, the half-elf. We want our charisma to be high, and I think that there's something just fitting about this kind of way that elves seem, aesthetically beautiful, but impassive and kind of unemotional and unapproachable. And I think that we're trying to like nail that theme with this like Ice Queen build, right? So I'm going to recommend half elf. The stat bonuses are great. It's going to give us a lot of what we need as we proceed to select our opening stats. Charisma is going to be king here. Highest charisma as you can. We're going to be bumping it again at 8 to kind of like max it out. And I think the only thing that really matters from there on then is constitution, right? Because you want to be making your constitution saves on your spells. For our class, there are 2 classes which access to the key ice spells that we really want to be casting. There's the wizard and there's the sorcerer. Now, you could absolutely play this character as a wizard. If so, just swap your charisma and intelligence, take wizard all the way. But there was something tantalizingly delicious in the sorcerer class that is going to make this an epically powerful cold caster. So we are going to take sorcerer for our class. And actually, this is going to be a full sorcerer build. So we're not going to bother with multi-classing because those high-level spells are really, really delicious for our purposes here. As is wonderfully the case with spellcasting classes, we probably don't need to worry about our equipment or gear very much. You obviously cannot wear heavy or medium armor, and you're going to get benefits later on to improve your kind of natural armor class. So you don't need to worry about armor, you don't need to worry about weapons. Grab a spellcasting focus and everything else is kind of up in the air. Maybe you want to deck yourself out in Christmas gear. Who knows? Maybe your DM will allow that. But don't worry about your gear for this particular character. At first level, a sorcerer is going to know 4 cantrips and 2 first level spells. I have 3 cantrips that I'm going to strongly recommend for this character, and for the other, pick your favorites. So the 3 I'm going to recommend are Ray of Frost, which is going to get you started with your ice powers, Frostbite, which is fun as well, and Shape Water. The reason why Shape Water is important is it's going to allow you to freeze standing water. And weirdly, that's the only spell on the spell list that is going to allow you to freeze existing water. So you're going to be blasting a lot of ice out of your hands, but if there's already a puddle, Shape Water is the only way to freeze that over. Maybe your DM will allow you to freeze things with cold damage. I'm also going to say that for your first level spells, make sure to grab Ice Knife, another great ice power. And then I think I toss it up to you. Shield could be really thematic, kind of creating this ice barrier around you that increases your AC. But so too could Fog Cloud. I think Fog, right, is this kind of cold air that you spread out. It's a very good strategic spell, and we are going to be looking at a lot of spells that are more damage focused with this build. So having a first level Fog Cloud that you could throw out there to provide disadvantage or maybe disrupt the battlefield could be very helpful. So pick your favorites there. If I was taking this character, I would definitely want to lean into the intimidation angle. It's always kind of bugged me that intimidation is charisma based. So you can have a first level bard character that is a silly, whimsical musician doing a better intimidation than like a level 18 barbarian who is, capable of killing giants in a single round. There just feels like this disconnect to me. But the part of it that is resonant, right, is this idea of intimidation being a almost like a social force of will, right? Someone who in the room is capable of staring you down and kind of like having a good poker face. And I think that encapsulates our Ice Princess, our Ice Queen very well.
Nobody knows what I'm capable of.
So I would say take intimidation proficiency, maybe grab deception and be the face of the party. You're not inclined to ask. You are telling, and when people ask you questions, you can lie to them, and they can't tell. They can't tell what you're really thinking. I think those would be pretty good. Any other proficiencies from your background, feel free to pick your favorites. And that's your level 1 character. You've got already some fantastic ice powers, some great charisma to back that up. You're rolling in cash because you didn't need to buy any expensive starting equipment. And I think that this is a great way to start off our Ice Princess. So because we're a sorcerer, right at first level, we get to select our sorcerer's origin. And our subclass is going to be draconic. I know, that isn't what Elsa looks like. Elsa does not look like a dragon. Elsa has nothing to do with dragons. No one, I think, in the clips that I'm showing, has anything to do with dragons. But being a draconic sorcerer doesn't necessarily mean that you appear dragon-like and have a lot to do with dragons. It just means somewhere in your ancestry there was some dragon mixed in. And specifically, we're going to want to choose either a silver or a white dragon. Obviously, white would give us kind of that snowy angle to things, but usually in the D&D universe, chromatic dragons or the like solid color dragons are evil, and the metallic dragons are good. So if you wanted to specifically be descended from a positive dragon, silver. Otherwise, I think white dragon is more fun. This is going to give you a couple of benefits. Firstly, you're going to get your draconic resilience. So this is going to boost your armor class, and this is why, if we're not wearing armor, we actually have a higher armor class. It kind of gives us a mage armor right at level 1 that's permanent, which is great. We don't have to take that on our spell list. And then your hit point maximum is also going to increase by 1 per level, so it's the equivalent of a Constitution bump, without the benefits to our other our saving throws. But this is very helpful, obviously, because as a sorcerer, our biggest weakness is any form of damage. Any form of damage at all. So we've mitigated that a little bit with our bonuses to AC and HP, which is great, in my opinion. Shores up our weaknesses. You're still not going to be the tank of the party. Avoid damage at all costs, but this is helpful to staying alive. Nothing less regal than being taken out by a single arrow. As we proceed to level 2, we're going to get our normal Font of Magic stuff that allows us to crunch sorcery points into spell slots or spell slots into sorcery points. We have kind of that exchange system there. So, for our Metamagic options, I think there are a lot that are very, very good. When I play sorcerers, every single sorcerer has got to have Quicken spell because it's so good for the action economy to be able to cast 2 spells on the same turn. And you feel like an absolute force of nature. However, quickening the spell is 2 sorcery points, and that's kind of a steep price to pay every turn. You're feeling it, even at level 4 and level 6 and level 8. Only getting a couple turns of quicken spells makes you feel like you're burning through those points pretty quickly. So with this character especially, since we are so damage focused and since so many of the cold spells out there do damage to kind of an area, the question is, do we take Empowered Spell to get more damage? Do we take Careful Spell so we can avoid our allies with our area of effects? Or do we take Heightened Spell so that if our spells require a spell save, a saving throw, which many of them do, we can make that kind of more potent. The ones I'm going to recommend here for the purposes of the channel are Empowered Spell for re-rolling damage dice and Careful Spell. Careful Spell, I think, is just the price you pay when you are taking things like, like these big high-level spells that deal damage to a radius. You want to feel like you're bringing down the ice storm on your enemies, but you're gonna have fighters and rogues and barbarians and monks and who knows what else in there also getting hit, and that's limiting your effectiveness as a team player. So Careful Spell is the penalty of being a team player, and Empowered Spell is going to get you extra damage. Empowered Spell is notably not an extremely strong Metamagic. It's only used to re-roll kind of low damage dice, and it is distinctly possible that you won't need to use it in any given combat. I'm going to argue that if you do get 1s or even 2s on your damage dice for some of these spells, it's worth the sorcery point to reroll. That on average you're adding 3 or 4 damage, and especially to an area of effect spell, where you're hitting a bunch of different enemies. That's good bang for your buck. But this is sort of a strategic use of the Empowered Spell with the strategic use of the Careful Spell. So you're actually going to have sorcery points to spare, is kind of the takeaway here. This is not a very sorcery point intensive character. So do with that what you may. Maybe that means more spell slots created with your Font of Magic ability, and then you'll be casting even more cold spells. At level 3 also we are getting our 2nd level spells. The ones that are perfect here are Rhymes Binding Ice. Very good kind of damage and also freezing people in place spell. And Silanox Snowball Swarm. I love the name of this spell, I love the flavor of this spell, it's very, very fun. Hopefully your DM allows this spell at the table. At level 4, we are going to look for a feat that is critical to this build, which is the Elemental Adept feat. Elemental Adept is going to allow you to, most importantly, overcome resistance to a given elemental type. So this is our way of getting back at those creatures that are resistant to cold damage. We are going to be able to treat them normally now that we have this feat. Huge benefit because this build is very cold damage dependent. I would say this is a must-have if you're taking a variant human or custom lineage for your race. Definitely you are going to want to select this as your starting feat, so that right from level 1 you don't have to worry about coming up against angry snowmen. So very, very helpful. The other fringe benefit is when you roll 1s on the damage die, you can treat them as 2s. This is going to even more water down what you need Empowered Spell for. So I think what Empowered Spell basically is a bad luck insurance at this point, because you are going to, even if you roll all 1s, they become all 2s. But that's not what you want if you're doing a really critical damaging spell hoping to knock out a bunch of enemies. That is level 4. For level 5, we are going to start breaking into our 3rd level spells. The 3rd level spells that I am going to recommend are actually not as ice themed. I think by this point your character is probably well established as the ice person. And so these are less about damage and more about playing on your kind of like elemental connection. So the first one I'm going to recommend is Sleet Storm, which doesn't actually do damage, but it creates an area of difficult terrain, and it also causes casters to have to make concentration checks within it. It says specifically like a cold sleet fires upon the area, so it's not hurting anyone, but it's very distracting and uncomfortable. I think this is a good moderation of your powers as you begin to ramp up these weather events that you're able to create, and you'll see in future spells just how crazy this can get. For now, you've sort of managed to chill, cause rain to condense and fall down in sleet. The other one I'm going to recommend is Protection from Energy. Obviously, there is a clear reason to believe that you should, be doing this when your allies are taking cold damage. This is essentially, you can give someone resistance to an elemental damage type. But I think it also makes sense, right, if you're up against fire, to be able to say, cool them down so now they have resistance to fire damage. Or, slow their body's core temperature so that the poison is less effective. I think there's a couple elemental damage types for which using cold to give you resistance makes sense. Not all of them. The spell is capable of more than is thematically appropriate, but you've got it in your toolkit to use as you like. You may also notice at this point that back at level 1 we had to choose between Fog Cloud and Shield. If you're not a fan of Protection of Energy, nothing's stopping you from adding another 1st level spell to your list. You've got the 4 slots after all. So go ahead and add the other 1st level spell if you think Protection from Energy is a little wonky. That is going to take us to 6th level, and exactly why I wanted to go Draconic Sorcerer. Obviously, we kind of had some of defensive bonuses right at the beginning. And we have an elemental affinity with cold because of our white dragon ancestry, and now that affinity is going to allow us to add our charisma modifier to the damage of cold spells. What elemental affinity says is, starting at 6th level, when you cast a spell that deals damage of the type associated with your draconic ancestry, add your charisma modifier to 1 damage roll of that spell. At the same time, you can spend a sorcery point to gain resistance to that damage type for an hour. So this is kind of a way of being like, we are the cold champion. So if we're up against a snowman or some sort of we're doing Rhymo the Frost Maiden or something like that, and we're getting hit with a lot of cold damage, anytime we cast a cold spell, it overcomes the resistance of our enemies, and also we can spend a sorcery point, which again we've got plenty. We're not using our empowered spell that often unless it's a really strategically useful roll. So we can add that resistance to ourselves. Super, super good. Right now our charisma's probably sitting at around a 16 because we took that feat at level 4. So we're adding 3 to a roll of our damage die. But then again, this is every time you cast a damage spell associated with cold. And we've got a lot of those. So 3 damage per spell hit it's quite good. And with that opportunity to gain resistance for an hour. It's great stuff. Moving on to level 7, we're going to get access to 4th level spells. And there's really only one here that I'm going to recommend. By this point, you've probably seen some spells on the spell list that you're interested in branching out beyond ice spells, but you've got to take Ice Storm. Ice Storm is going on there. This is kind of the upgrade of your Sleet Storm, right? You've turned up the cold on this weather event that you're creating. And battering people around, and this is really where Careful Spell comes in my opinion. You're gonna want to use Careful Spell when you cast Ice Storm so that you don't hurt your allies, because this is a big risk. I think this is the most likely one to do. It's got a very large radius, but you can just blast people around. Add your Charisma modifier to the damage roll for this. Empower it if you need to, because again, this is hitting multiple targets. And of course, you're overcoming cold resistance. Moving on to level 8, a very simple Charisma bump is going to help us a lot. So I'm just going to add to our spell save DC, it's going to add to our spell attack, it's going to add to that Charisma boost to our damage when we cast cold spells, which is all of them. Just a very useful bump. As we move on to level 9, we're going to hit our 5th level spells. There's just one I want to talk about here, and that is of course Cone of Colds. Just this very powerful heavy hitter cold damage spell, blasts out in a cone. You're going to want this. This is going to be the ultimate, like, you extend your hand and it just like erupts from you, just a full destructive blizzard out, hitting all of the opponents in that cone. Finally, we are going to be able to make it to level 10, and we are getting one more Metamagic option. Last time we were here at these crossroads, we were debating between, adding the heightened spell against the saving throws. We could grab a Quicken for these just like incredible burst turns. I think that would be super, super cool to call down an Ice Storm and also, hit someone with a Ray of Frost or something like that. And that'll we've got enough sorcery points now to start consuming them, which I think is very, very good. It has not escaped my attention that we have moved from a lot of spell attacks to a lot of saving throws, and specifically Constitution saving throws, which is a tough stat to hit on, especially with monsters. I'm going to recommend that heightened spell then, so that you can give your opponents disadvantage on their saving throws against your spells. A lot of these kind of cold spells are racking up those saving throws. That's the character. Absolute master of cold magic. Adding your charisma bonus to every damage roll of the spell. Able to re-roll those damage die if you need it. With overcoming resistance to your damage specialty of choice automatically. Love this build, and I hope you enjoy it for your holiday games.